cannot believe it has been 25 years since WCW Monday Nitro went off the air, Brad. Can you believe it? That simulcast with Monday Night Raw 25 years ago. What better way, we thought, though, than to celebrate than by going through the top 10 memorable moments of WCW Monday Nitro. This is episode 28 of That Sweet Pop. My name's Dion McCracken. He is Brad Lewis. And Brad, were you a Raw guy or were you a Nitro guy?
I was a Raw guy because I was WWE from like 88. And at the time, I just found it hard to find WCW stuff. I know it did end up on our TV screens in around 97, 98. I'm sure you'll set me straight on that. But yeah, I do remember, Dion, not having Sky television, but do you remember when you could find the Sky channel and it was pixelated and you couldn't see anything?
Yes.
I used to listen to Worldwide on Sky on a Saturday or Sunday night, basically listening to it like a radio show. And I remember them saying at one point, this is a memory of mine, the most hated man in professional wrestling, Hollywood Hulk Hogan. I'm like, what? Hulk Hogan's a bad guy? And that sparked my interest in WCW because this was a couple of years before the internet, right? So if you didn't know, you didn't know. And I know TV Guide used to have spoilers and Sunday News used to post stuff every now and then, but I just remember listening to that show and then at that point I'm like, man, I need to find out what's happening in this WCW with Hogan being a bad guy.
Yeah, I didn't really follow Worldwide that much. Now and then if I was around at someone's house and they had Sky and it was on, I'd watch it, but it always felt like, because it was in the studio, it was like, this isn't like WWF back in the day. But just to give people a little bit of context about where our top 10 memorable moments come from and why we focus on a certain time period, yes, Worldwide was on that sort of 95, 96 period. That dropped away. I guess the rights to that lapsed or whatever the case may be. And we were following WCW, like you say, through the internet, really, right? So WCW, they were really pioneers of the online world. So they had the website up and running far before WWF had theirs. So you could follow through the website. You could catch up with fans on the message boards. If you were really lucky, you could listen to a WCW pay-per-view. Do you remember this? Through Real Audio. There's a blast from the past. I remember listening to Halloween Havoc 96. That was the one where Roddy Piper returned, and I was one of the lucky 1,000 global listeners to listen to that. Mark Madden, I think, and maybe Lee Marshall were the commentators of that back in the day. But the first broadcast that we got on free-to-air television, Uncensored 97. Do you remember this coming on the air?
I don't. I don't know why, but I remember the first WCW event that I watched was maybe Fall Brawl, or it might have been Bash at the Beach 97. And then United Video Easy started releasing the tapes, and I was hooked, man. I think they released maybe a Bash at the Beach first, and then I just wanted to find out what was happening. I thought the product was better than what I was seeing on WWF at the time, even though Stone Cold was at his prime. Loved the NWO. So yeah, it's all jumbled memories, Dion, which I think is probably the same for most Kiwis when it comes to that. But like I've interviewed a few New Zealand pro wrestlers, and they were WCW fans. They were Goldberg fans. That's how they became wrestling fans, because they were Goldberg fans.
Man, I miss video stores. So Uncensored 97 was randomly just the first show that popped up. And I remember seeing it on a TV Guide back when TV Guide was a thing that you used to get every week. And seeing that this WCW pay-per-view was going to be on, which I thought was fantastic because I've been following it again online. Then we got the 1 hour international version of Nitro.
Yeah.
That would air TV2 Fridays, 10 o'clock or whatever.
I remember that. Watched it every Friday.
But Bash at the Beach 97, you mentioned, that was a real game changer for us as New Zealand wrestling fans, because it took place, Monday New Zealand time and aired Friday New Zealand time, just a few days behind, which now sounds crazy, but then was absolutely mind-blowing. And then I think there were the catch-ups of the pay-per-views between Uncensored and Bash at the Beach, which aired at like 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday nights, which were good after a night out. Eventually we got TNT. Nitro still aired on delay on Saturdays. I think we eventually got it live on TNT, and we eventually got live WCW pay-per-views. Sold Out 2000 was the very first one. Chris Benoit, of course, winning the the World Heavyweight Championship against Sid Vicious. Not that it's
and that was the beginning of the end, really. Like with the Radicals or all those guys leaving the following day, and Bret Hart's injury and injuries to NWO members. That was the beginning of the end for WCW, and I think sold out 2,000. Many people believe was the start of the end of WCW.
Yeah, still crazy that they let them go. I guess, Bischoff felt he had no choice. Was Bischoff even in charge then? I think he was back, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think he set an ultimatum. If anyone put your hand up, you want to leave, you can walk out right now. And Shane Douglas and was one of those. And then he ended up not getting picked up by WWE, so he came back to WCW a couple of days later, which was interesting.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So our top 10 memorable moments of WCW Monday Nitro, you can see now why a lot of them will be sort of 97 onward for us, because we didn't really see much of 95 and 96 until we got the network. So let's kick things off. Number 10, Bret Hart outsmarts Goldberg. You'll remember this very well, Brad, I have no doubt. This took place in Toronto, right? And Bret Hart came out and he did a spoken word rendition of O Canada before calling out Goldberg. Goldberg comes to the ring, spears Bret. Both men go down, but Goldberg doesn't get up in a hurry. Bret sells for a minute or so. He eventually gets up, reveals the steel plate, and then quits WCW. What I always liked was he called WCW the WCW, which I always thought might have been a bit of a rib. Here in the WCW. This was a hell of a moment.
WCW. Yeah, it was. And look, we kind of got a payoff in December that year, right? With Starrcade. Although I think Owen's death actually ended up turning Bret from a heel to babyface. And look, Bret's WCW career is probably another podcast all in itself, Dion, with the way that he was mishandled. But this was probably, outside of him winning the title, was the best moment he had in WCW. And look, for those that aren't WCW fans, Goldberg was at the height of his popularity around this time, sort of from mid-98 through till the end of 99. And the spear was, alongside the Stone Cold Stunner, the most over move in pro wrestling. And it was more over than the jackhammer, really. And yeah, genius from Bret. And it's been talked about that listening to the Eric Bischoff podcast with Comrade Thompson, that Goldberg was against this, felt that it would ruin his aura. But Bret said, look, this is all about the story and about me, perceiving that I'm smarter than you. And they had another plan in mind, but then Goldberg went and broke his hand I think the next week or maybe the week after that.
Cut it open? Was that smashing the window?
Yeah, and they had a plan in mind for Bret and Goldberg for, I think, Bash at the Beach. There was going to be, they were going to have a title match. Bret was going to win the belt at some point, and they were going to have a title match at Bash at the Beach, which never came to fruition. And then obviously Owen passed away, and Bret turned babyface, and they ended up moving them towards Starrcade, and then Bret joined the NWO. But what a great moment to have the iron plate underneath them. And I thought, I watched this yesterday, Dion, in preparation for this, and I thought the commentary was really good. And I don't think we give Tony Schiavone enough kudos. Calls the moments really well. I felt like I think sometimes he could be overexcited, but I thought he called this moment really, really well. And the crowd popped huge. There was a pro Bret crowd, big time, and they popped huge. And it was a great moment because it was the first time I know that Goldberg had lost with the stun gun and all that sort of stuff, but this was the first moment you really felt that someone got the better of Goldberg.
Yeah, that steel plate, it felt like something that was it was a very Bret Hart thing to do. Yeah. He'd thought through what his opponent was going to, or his nemesis was going to try and take him down with, and there was a brilliant move. There's two things that we remember from Goldberg and Bret. One is the steel plate, the other is the kick to the head, and Bret tends to remind us every couple of weeks. You're right as well. This is just 2 months before the passing of Owen Hart. Kind of crazy. All right, number 9, the finger poke of doom. We said these were memorable. We didn't say they were the best. Again, isn't it funny that sometimes it's the crap that you remember the most?
Yeah.
And speaking of Goldberg, Nash had just beaten Goldberg for the championship and broken that 173-0 streak at the time, which again, crazy move. It had to happen at some stage, but it just didn't feel like the right one. And this really made it feel not like the right one, because what was the point? Goldberg loses to Nash. The following Nitro, Nash comes to the ring. For those that don't know what on earth we're talking about, there meant to be a rematch on Nitro between Nash and Goldberg. Goldberg got arrested, and I'm not sure if you remember what the charge was, Brad. It was for
Elizabeth?
apparent stalking of Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Which was subsequently proven to be, surprise, surprise, all a lie, which opened up the possibility for Hogan challenging for the title. Hogan comes to the ring
as a babyface,
jeans and boots, a babyface with a black shirt. I think he was with Steiner at the time. I think he was with Scott Steiner.
He was kind of in and out because there was a storyline going, because he hadn't been in WCW for quite some time, and there was a story going around that he was going to run for president, and it was actually some chat that he was semi-retired, but that was just, and this is the thing about WCW, Dion, is they just got obsessed with the swerve. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later on when we go through our match review of the week for the match that was selected for us to watch. And I think that they just got obsessed with the let's dupe the fans and swerve the fans, and they liked that shock moment television. And this was this was a pre-Russo too, I believe. So yeah, they just got obsessed with the swerve.
Yeah, big time. So the swerve came. Nash, finger in the chest. Hogan, other way around. Hogan, finger in the chest. Nash just drops like a sack of you-know-what, gets the 1, 2, 3. Everyone giggles. Goldberg comes to the ring.
They stole this finish. You know they stole this finish from the Click, right? Because Triple H and Shawn Michaels did this in like maybe late 97 for the European title. So people forget that, right? And people are talking about the finger poker doom being the start of the downfall of WCW. WCW had some awesome pay-per-views in 99, some really good pay-per-views. And I think they had some decent storytelling throughout the year as well. But yeah, they stole this finish off Triple H and Shawn Michaels, and people don't remember that. And it certainly didn't discourage WWF from gaining momentum soon after.
Yeah. You know what else is kind of funny and kind of not about this moment was when Goldberg eventually came to the ring and they spray paint him, they spray paint the belt, and they sprayed his bald head completely black. And all of a sudden, Goldberg kind of woke up because he was not too pleased about that. And I imagine there would have been some words backstage after that incident.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I don't know, Dion, like, you're right. Like, what was the point of Nash, who was dominant at the time? He won World War III, right, which was WCW's version of the Royal Rumble. Got the title match at Starrcade and, booked himself to be the first man to beat Goldberg, because I don't know if you realize this, but Nash had the book. Nash had the book at the time. And he talked about how all of this was to make Goldberg a bigger face. He was already the biggest face outside of Stone Cold in pro wrestling, and some would argue, Dion, he was bigger than Stone Cold in some aspects. But yeah, like to put the belt on Hogan again, to be obsessed with the swerve and to provide that shock television, it just completely defeated the purpose of giving Nash the rub, which he probably didn't need to beat Goldberg. Like, wouldn't have, you probably could have got to Hogan Goldberg too at this point and done a better story. But yeah, the finger poker doom, man, like it will live in infamy, Mr. McCracken.
And as will this, because it wasn't the only time that night that WCW shit the bed, because this is the same episode where Tony Schiavone said, well, that'll get butts and seats, and sent 600,000 viewers over to Raw. January 4, 1999, Mankind wins his first WWF championship.
Did not know that correlation.
I did not know that until I started looking into this episode a bit more. That's nuts, isn't it? That's arguably a moment, part of the beginning of the end as well.
Yes, and and what I think Raw beat Nitro for the first time in a quarter, in about a year and a half at that point. So was it 83 weeks? Of course, is the famous quote. But yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Well, they were back and forth, I think, at that stage a lot, wasn't it? They were, was a bit more of the turning of the tide.
Yeah, where Raw would start to dominate through 99. Yeah. But like I said, like, WCW still had great television and great pay-per-views throughout 99. There's some, I think, it's either Slamboree or Spring Stampede's one of my favorite WCW pay-per-views of all time. Like,
from 99?
Yeah, I think it was 99. They had some great events over the course of the following 12 months. It's just, this was, I just think they got carried away with their own stuff that made them big, which was the Scott Hall walking out of the crowd Kevin Nash. Is this where the big boys play, huh?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like they got obsessed with that sort of television.
Yeah, yeah. Let's move on. Number 8, the debut of Warrior, August 17,
Oh,
1998. And again, it sort of feels like we're kind of starting off with some
wait, I thought the
negative
Renegade
ones.
was the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, was he? No, I thought the Disciple was the Barber. Funnily enough, I watched this back this week as well. I completely forgot that Warrior called Disciple out for being Hogan's barber. I'm not sure if that was. I kind of felt that we weren't meant to know that it was
Yeah.
Ed Leslie was the Disciple. Anyway, what I thought was interesting about this was the second promo Hogan had of Nitro. Man, he had so many promos on Nitro. If he chose to appear, that always start and he'd ramble and
then he'd come back in the middle.
He'd come back in the middle, as he did for this one. And there were rumors that Warrior was going to appear. I think there were even some signs in the crowd. And Hogan had that line of, you know, there's not a man who can stop me from getting my title. There's not a warrior on the planet Earth. And then the lights go out. I thought the entrance was pretty cool.
It was awesome.
And
I thought the music was good.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it was, I remember back then thinking, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I thought back then. I probably still thought it was great. I was like, man, Warrior's back. How great is this? But it's it goes down in infamy as being not a great promo. There were parts of it I thought were pretty good. A little bit in the middle, but it started very slow and it just dragged on. And you could almost see Eric Bischoff seething in the background thinking, take it home, brother.
He went 11 minutes overtime.
Wow.
11 minutes. Eric Bischoff has talked about this on 83 Weeks, that the original plan was for a short and sweet sort of 4 or 5 minute promo. It ended up going about 16 minutes, the whole segment. And Warrior just like decided to cash in all of the checks.
Yes, didn't he?
Right? Like decided that, you know, and I don't think Jim Hellwig, spoiler alert, that's who the Ultimate Warrior was, took this whole stint seriously. I think he knew he was coming to lay down for Hogan at some point, and he was going to get all his licks in on the way. And yeah, like he cashed in some checks. He visibly made Hogan pissed. You could tell Hogan was like, bro, like, you know, and you could see Eric Bischoff almost like losing a couple of brain cells listening to the Warrior talk. Look, what promised and started off as a really cool moment for WCW with the Warrior making his debut and coming out to what I thought was really cool sort of updated rock version of his entrance music, which Jimmy Hart wrote by all accounts. I really liked. And then about a minute into the promo, I'm like, man, this is so bad. And I remember watching this live, or on tape delay or whatever it was, and liking it because I was a Warrior Warrior fan.
Yeah, of course.
But like, you know, you watch this 30 years later and you're just like, this is the shits.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was real bad.
It had only been 2 years since he was in WWF. That WrestleMania 12 comeback. It felt like he'd been away for a long time, but it really wasn't.
Yeah.
But in that period of time, promos had changed so much. They went from being very well produced backstage segments in a controlled environment with a director that makes sure that they get exactly what they want, to giving guys a couple of microphones and sending them out to the ring, which was something that Warrior never really did. Once or twice, of course, he did, but not for any sustained period. And Warrior's not the kind of guy that you could give a live mic and just say, "Go for your life, sunshine.
Go, Jim. Yeah. You do it."
Yeah. So
Warrior was not made for live television. Like, I've just recently been watching a whole bunch of stuff in WWF archives, and was watching a Saturday night main event, which was the lead up to Hogan Warrior at WrestleMania. And I think it was Warrior Bravo.
Yeah, I loved that show. That was the main event. That aired in New Zealand.
It was a great show. Like, Hogan Macho was really good, and the Warrior Bravo match was excellent. But Warrior cut 3 promos on that show. And the first one, man, was just like, oh, bro. Like, and you could, like, he's great in those pre-taped sort of 30-second Warriors arise. But when he's got to go out there and build a story, and, you know, and have to be Jim Hellwig for a minute, like, he was not made for what was then modern pro wrestling. He was a Superstars of Wrestling wrestler, not a Monday Night Raw or Nitro wrestler, if that makes sense.
Totally, yeah.
Character as well. And I think by then, the 9, 10, 12-year-old kids that had been Warrior fans in 1988, they were Stone Cold fans by 1998 and wanted nothing to do with a painted face like a bodybuilder dude who could clothesline and body slam people.
That main event was great that you talk about. It was the third main event, I think, because it was they take place on Fridays in the States. Hence, they were the main event and not Saturday night's main event. That's my understanding anyway.
Yeah.
And they were always used to build Mania, right? The first one was the Andre Hogan. The second one was
the most watched
Twin
wrestling
Towers.
match in the history of pro wrestling.
100%. And then the following year was Twin Towers and Mega Powers. We all know
Mega Powers
what
Explode.
happened there. And this third one, it was amazing for us as New Zealand wrestling fans because we had no idea it was coming on. I don't believe it was advertised. I believe it was still Superstars of Wrestling. And then the show comes on with Hogan and Savage. You're right, James Buster Douglas, who had just knocked out Mike Tyson in Japan as special referee.
Yeah.
Man, that was fantastic. This run by Warrior, he had 3 matches. I completely forgot about this. He's
the reason for the British Bulldogs' early retirement, semi-retirement. The Ultimate Warrior. So Warrior had a trap door because you know how he used to the smoke used to hit and he used to come out of nowhere.
Yep.
So at Fall Brawl, I believe it was, Warrior was involved in the cage match, the War Games match, the worst War Games match in history, I might add. And the British Bulldog was in the opening match of the night. He took a backdrop from maybe Disco Inferno or Alex Wright, landed on the edge of Warrior's trap door and screwed his back. And then I think he made a brief comeback to WWE in like 99, 2000. But he was he was addicted to painkillers at that point. And because of that injury. So real shame.
So when I looked at those 3 matches, you're right. He was in the Fall Brawl schmoz, the War Games match, which was Team NWO, Team Hollywood,
Team Piper,
Wolfpack, and Team WCW.
Yeah,
which was Warrior, DDP, and Piper.
Yeah.
But how's this a tag team match on Nitro on paper? Think of this on paper. Don't think of how it went down.
Where you're going.
Sting and Warrior against Bret and Hogan.
If you want to pull a rating, you advertise that and everyone's switching over to because that's a dream match.
Absolutely.
Right? It's an absolute surefire dream match. But
on paper.
At the time, Bret Hart was the most disinteresting character on W. You just didn't buy what he was selling.
Well, he was disinteresting because he was disinterested.
Yes. Hogan was old. The character was old. Warrior was misplaced. Sting was probably the only, and by that point, the Sting stuff had kind of worn off too. He was switching between, I don't know if that was around his Wolfpack time or whatever, but I know he'd sort of lost, he'd lost his smile almost, to quote a Shawn Michaels quote. But on paper, that's like, man, this match is going to be awesome. When you really know that there's probably only 2 good workers involved, and maybe it wouldn't be so good.
Yeah. And of course, eventually the Halloween Havoc match, which
Horace
it was
Hogan,
all
baby.
about. It was all about getting Hogan's WrestleMania 6 win back.
And building Horace Hogan into a superstar, of course.
Yeah, wasn't he just?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to some more positive stuff. Number 7, the Cruiserweight Division.
Yes, Dion.
I'm going to give you 6 names. I've got 6 names for you.
Okay.
Rey Mysterio.
Boom.
Psychosis.
Yes.
Juventud Guerrera.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie Guerrero.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimo Dragon. Chris Jericho.
Yeah.
Bangers. You put one of these guys in any match, and if there happens to be 2 of them in the match, incredible stuff. And they were the pillars of the division, right? They had like Dean Malenko and Alex Wright, and
they would come in and out and have great matches. But you're right. And look, I know that we are in the process of having homework and watching matches. And look, if someone could please vote for me and Dion to go and watch Ultimo Dragon Rey Mysterio, I think it was 96 Bash at the Beach. I would love to watch that. I might be wrong. Maybe it was Great American Bash. It was certainly around June or July 96. Also the 3 pay-per-view matches over the course of a year that Eddie and Ray had together, sort of 96, 97. But you're right, Dion. I think, and you sort of threw in like a Chavo Guerrero here or there, and like some of the Japanese cruiserweights that they brought in, and stuff like that. But man, the Cruiserweight division was actually, we didn't know it at the time, Dion, but it was a peek into what the future of pro wrestling would look like bell to bell. And there are matches that WCW put on at that time, both on television and pay-per-view, that you could throw into an AEW, NXT, or WWE or TNA ring right now, and they would not look out of place. It would
Good call.
like it just wouldn't, and it would be engaging, and like, you know, it was the first time we really on a regular basis got to see planches and springboards, and flips. You know, I mean, and look, add a Billy Kidman into that conversation too, right? Because when he removed himself from the flock and became the white shirt jeans guy, he also became a real big part of that
Mm,
cruiserweight division, I thought, as well. So,
yeah.
yeah, I think the 96 through to mid 99, the cruiserweights was almost the highlight of every WCW show from a wrestling standpoint. Well,
Mm,
not almost was it was the highlight
absolutely.
from a wrestling standpoint.
For all of the things that Eric Bischoff, he gets praised for a lot of stuff, and so he should. The guy was a genius.
Yeah,
Even if sometimes they weren't his ideas, if you want to go down that route, doesn't matter. He was still a genius and put this thing together. This may have been one of his greatest calls. The cruiserweight division was just something that just drew people in because the action was unlike anything that had been seen in North American wrestling, right, with the Japanese influence and certainly the huge lucha influence. And WWF tried to jump on the bandwagon, but failed.
Takamichinoku.
Was it Taka and Aguilar at WrestleMania 14 or
Yeah,
something? Was
who
that?
was S.A. Rios, I think, and they had Brian Christopher in there at some
Yeah,
point.
yeah. The
And
light heavyweight championship,
Devon
right?
Storm, who became Crowbar.
Mm,
And I think a very, very young Scotty Too Hottie Taylor was involved in their light heavyweight tournament.
never really
as
took off,
well.
did it? Never really took off.
And they were trying to be WCW, but they didn't have Rey Mysterio,
Mm,
and they didn't have the Ultimo Dragon. They didn't have Juventud Psychosis, Eddie Guerrero, and you know the others.
yeah, that Halloween Havoc match that you mentioned earlier, Ray and Eddie. It's been years since I watched that. Hopefully, that's
Yeah.
one we can review in the near
And
future.
just before we move to the next point, gotta say, and like I know that it didn't go well for him in WWF, but Ultimo Dragon Dion
Mm,
was just phenomenal.
yeah.
Like he was near perfection in the ring, and just a great watch. And like, you know, yeah, like I said, his WWF stint, which was short and sweet, didn't go so well, but
They tried.
they did try. They did try. He got a WrestleMania match involved in a 10-man cruiserweight elimination match or something like that. But
Mm,
yeah, his WCW stuff was when he was the belt collector, you know, before Mercedes
yes.
Moné
Super
was.
J Cup, I think it was. Wasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, and he came to the ring with all those belts, and Sonny Ono, who was a great character, by the way, and also a big part of the cruiserweight division in terms of being the manager of Ultimo Dragon and the Japanese stars.
Yeah.
And you know what? It makes me want to go back now and watch a whole bunch of cruiserweight matches.
Let's do that. But first, let's move on to number 6, the Raw and Nitro simulcast. We touched on it earlier, March 26, 2001. You know,
Just over, it's like as we record this, it's March 30. So what are we looking at? 25 years ago?
Yeah, 25 years.
Where wrestling changed forever.
Yeah, it really did, and it wasn't the first time this had happened. I you know, I don't know too much about it, but I think it was Black Saturday when WWF took over one of WCW or NWA's time slots. I guess that was kind of that era's version. To us, this is obviously feels much bigger, right? Because in some ways, this was also a bit of a downfall in wrestling. Clearly for WCW, and a little bit for WWF because things weren't tremendous without competition for a while. I interviewed Shane McMahon here in New Zealand back in 2005, and I asked him about this moment. And as he was speaking about it, he stopped and he said, "I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about it." This was so huge for the McMahon family, and it was big for us wrestling fans at the time too, because the optimists in us thought, think of all these tremendous matchups we're going to have. Now we're going to have the NWO, we're going to have Goldberg, we're going to have Sting, DDP, Booker T. All these guys are going to come in. We're going to have the most tremendous dream matches. Didn't quite happen. But the moment itself, unbelievable. To see Shane McMahon enter the WCW Monday Nitro ring and be in a conversation with his father, Vince, on a completely different show, less than a week out from their WrestleMania 17 encounter. You talk about the timing of things. It could not have been any greater timing for WWF.
Yeah, and main evented by Sting and Ric Flair, and watching it. There's been a lot of social media clips of the the WCW stuff in recent days
Mm.
around this, and by all accounts, Ric Flair did not want to wrestle that day. And of course, he wrestled with a shirt on because he was out of shape. But Vince had told Shane that the main event was to be Sting versus Flair to honor what they had done for WCW, because Vince, at the end of the day, Vince knew that this was the end of the NWA / WCW / his opposition, and Flair and Sting were the two biggest names to come out of that territory, right? So he wanted that match to happen, and it did happen, and Flair wrestled with a shirt on, which you all remember. And so I found that an interesting sort of side part to all of this. I think Booker T won the world title over Scott Steiner because Booker, I think, had already committed to WWF through that day, whereas all the other guys that were on, like, we're talking like $3, $4, $5 million a year contracts. Like, you know what? My contract doesn't run out for 18 months. I'm just going to sit at home, thanks. And
nuts, isn't it?
I think they were able to do deals with the likes of Rey Mysterio and a few other guys, but I think Rey might have even come along maybe a year later even. But it didn't work out how we wanted to. The invasion angle sucked, and WCW was snake bitten in WWE from the moment the Booker T Buff Bagwell match happened at the back end of a Raw a couple of weeks later, which and WWF's audience just shat all over it and said no thanks.
As did Vince McMahon.
Which is a real shame, because I think the plan, from what I've read, Meltzer covers this really, really well in his newsletters around the time, which I've gone back and looked at in preparation for this. Talks about the plan was for WCW to take the Monday slot and WWF would take the Thursday slot. Shane McMahon would run WCW on a Monday. Vince McMahon would run WWF SmackDown on a Thursday. But it just didn't work out because I think, in reflection, if they'd been able to get your Hogans, your Nashes, your Goldbergs, it would have been amazing. What they weren't able to do, but they weren't able to do that. But from a moment standpoint, which is what we're discussing here today on the potty, Dion, an amazing moment to see the start of that show and Shane McMahon inside. Well, Vince McMahon saying, I've crushed my opposition. Jeff Jarrett fired on the spot. Which was legit. He was actually fired
not for
on
Jarrett,
the spot.
but for so many of the people that were instrumental in WCW.
And Bruce Pritchard apparently was on location and produced the whole entire show and told people this is what's happening. And it must have been a real sad moment for all of those people behind the scenes at WCW. Real sad moment.
Yeah, and the glory of 25 years later is all of these stories come out. Probably 80% of them are true, and of that 80%, many have been embellished. But I recently listened to Bruce Pritchard saying that their understanding was, as part of the purchase, they were purchasing the time slots on TBS and TNT, and that wasn't to be. And that's a good part of the reason as to why things fell down. Anyway, they landed where they landed, and it is part of wrestling folklore. Right, folks, let's move on to number 5. Lex Luger defeats Hollywood Hogan August 4, 1997. Here's something I didn't realize. Though this was the 100th episode of WCW Monday Nitro, it was actually the 99th episode of WCW Monday Nitro. And a few weeks earlier, there was a Saturday Nitro. I'm not sure if it was a house show, but it was an audio-only edition. And the purpose of that was to make August 4 the 100th edition. That's my understanding. I might have that story wrong, but certainly on the network, this was listed as episode 99. So go figure. What was amazing about this is, even though Hogan was just shy of a year into his World Championship run, it felt like this championship could not be taken away from Hogan. And that was even from a kayfabe perspective. You forget about the politicking behind the scenes. It felt like what was happening on screen made Hogan absolutely flawless, absolutely unbeatable. And here we have Luger come out and eventually rack Hogan. Hogan submits. It was a jaw-dropping moment. I don't think it was one that anyone really expected, because it was largely out of the blue, even though this 100th episode of Nitro was very, very well advertised as this is going to be one of the biggest events in WCW history. Do you remember watching this on TV?
I do, and I remember the pop being ginormous when Luger won, because Hogan was unbeatable, right? Like, he had the entire NWO faction behind him. He had a referee in his back pocket. He had the boss and Eric Bischoff. So it was a really cool moment, a great moment for Lex Luger, I think, as well. As a babyface, because Lex had kind of been weirdly handled from his debut on Nitro, the very first episode of Nitro, 99 episodes earlier in 1995, where he'd been a tweener and in and out, and never really didn't really have a place. So this was huge for him. I do kind of think it took a little bit away from what would happen a few months later, like where Sting was supposed to be the guy to overcome Hogan.
Yeah.
And he did in a weird kind of way. But it was a great moment, poperating, which was what it was all about. And then, hey, let's just hand the title back to Hogan a week later. Was it Road Wild?
It was Road Wild, yeah. How crazy is that? Have it for a few days, we'll get the moment, we'll pop a rating, and then slap it back on Hogan. But they had to, right? I will have
to say, Luger looked awesome with the big gold belt.
Yeah, he did, didn't he?
Like, he had that body type. And look, if you go back to the 80s and stuff when he was feuding with Flair, he never really, I don't think he ever got to wear the big gold belt, because he won, when he became WCW champion in 91 after Flair left, it was that weird sort of WWF-like title that they were using. And I just thought it's not like Lex Luger had a stint as a dominant world champ. He never really did, right?
No.
He had a week here. I think this was the only time he held the WCW title in the Nitro era. I could be wrong on that, but I'm reasonably certain I'm not. He looked really good with that belt. That belt just suited his body type. And I wonder if because he was so over at the time. Remember a World War III, it might have been 96 or 97, when the crowd really wanted him to win. This was, I think 97 was his best year, outside of maybe 80, 88, 80, 89 when he was feuding with Flair as a babyface, 87, 88. I think 90, this year was his best year. 97 was his best year in pro wrestling, when he was over as a character.
Yeah. Well, they were just 6 weeks or so removed from that big Bash at the Beach 97 event that I mentioned earlier, one of the few that we got just a few days after occurring in the States. So it was it who did Luger team with? Luger and the Giant, wasn't it, against Hogan and Rodman? Yeah. Rodman, of course, about to enter the Hall of Fame because of that match.
Yeah.
And they had to get the belt back on Hogan because bigger things were to come. Of course, the long-term play was the Starrcade Showdown with Sting. All right, folks, we're heading into the top 4. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're still with us. Number 4 is Arn Anderson reunites the Four Horsemen, September 14, 1998. I found it quite difficult to try and track down some footage of this. Maybe it was just the way the algorithm was reacting to my searches, but I eventually found one. And this was so infamous because it was the return of Ric Flair, who we thought was gone from WCW. You'll remember that Flair asked for time off, I believe. I think it was around a pay-per-view time. So he wanted to watch his son Reed competing in a wrestling tournament.
Correct.
Bischoff said absolutely not. Flair no-showed. Bischoff sues Flair. Flair's off television. What I didn't know, and again, I don't know if
you're going to go there, but the famous story of him driving around an arena to show up at a WWF pay-per-view?
Yes. That was it. I think it was an Unforgiven.
Unforgiven.
Which, what if I do the math? What year was this? Unforgiven 98.
It was May, or it was after WrestleMania 98.
Yeah, so that would have had Taker and Kane and Austin and Mankind or Mick Foley or Dude Love.
I think it was Dude Love.
Yeah, far out. Imagine that if he'd popped up.
Yeah, and he was on Jim Ross is on commentary. He's literally texting Ric Flair while he's on commentary saying, keep driving around, we're trying to get this contract thing sorted.
I forgot that story.
And can you imagine JR's there calling like matches with the king next to him, and he's texting the Nature Boy Ric Flair, a WCW wrestler, saying, do not enter the building yet, we have not got this thing signed off.
Wow.
And Jim said it was within seconds of being approved, but the lawyers in the end just said, no, we don't have his contract, we cannot put him on television, despite the fact that Flair had told them he was done and he'd been faxed his release papers or something.
Yeah, man, nuts. And anyway, they came to the agreement, right? And Arn calls them out. They're all dressed up in suits. Real emotional promo. Arn wasn't always eloquent on the mic, I thought, but he had such a gravitas to him and a way of getting emotion out of you. The Fall Brawl 97 match that we're going to be talking about, that's one of my favorite promos of all time, where he tells Kurt Hennig,
my spot.
Yeah, I'll give you the only thing I got left to give. I'll give you my spot. And this promo, though, in 98, with the reforming of the Horsemen, Bischoff comes out near the end and tells Flair there's going to be hell to pay. And then Flair has that famous line of, fire me, I'm already fired. Fire me, I'm already fired.
I'm already fired. Yeah. It's so good.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, there was legit heat between those two, right? Because of what had occurred throughout the year, which they ended up playing out on television. But yeah, this was a great moment. And it was probably the only time in his career that Steve Mongo McMichael looked like an absolute bona fide superstar. But yeah, they all look great, didn't they? And Arn, man, what a great promo that guy was. And we never talk about him in the list of great promos, but he just had he had the Arn Anderson style.
He had a way, yeah.
And it was a great style. It was believable. And he always did what he did with passion, and I thought incredible intensity in his promos.
Yeah.
And this was truly a great WCW moment. Didn't lead to anything, because I think after this promo, Bischoff's like, creatively, nah, we're not doing anything with this, guys. I think Flair had a couple of big matches with Bischoff, and then David Flair turned, and there was all that bollocks. But we never really got the true payoff. I think Malenko and Benoit may have won some tag titles at some point, but it was actually it was the last true great Four Horsemen moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was them, apologies, I can't remember if I've mentioned this just 5 minutes ago, but this was them reforming pretty much after that War Games match that we're going to be discussing later. They essentially dissolved after that.
Correct.
And then Flair's fired, and then he comes back. All right, memorable moment number 3 isn't quite a moment, it's a period of time. And that is Sting hanging in the rafters. This was so badass, man. This was so badass. The whole character wasn't it?
Yeah,
the
full
Crow
credit to the great Razor
movie.
Ramon. So this, and as a whole, the Sting character from late 96 through to Starrcade 97 was awesome. And he didn't do anything apart from come down from the rafters and hit people with baseball bats, or threaten to hit people with baseball bats. But for Scott Hall, what a creative genius he was. Such a shame that outside influences influenced him, because I think he could have been a great creative person in WWE potentially, which is a real shame. But for him, they wanted to create something different for Sting, and they wanted to blur the lines between reality and also, is he good or is he bad? They wanted him, and he was just like, why don't you just dress up like the guy from The Crow? And we don't know if you're good. You're always got a sad face. You're wearing black. You're wearing white, which is the NWO colors. But also, we know you hate Hogan. So what a great idea from him. And I thought Steve Borden played the character superbly, and it's a character that he carried through for the last 25, 30 years of his career.
Yeah. This had to be so tough for him, being out of action for so long. He would have been making bank because
But he wasn't tanning.
So he was saving even more money. They were heavily relying on this Hogan and Sting match for Starrcade 97, but I think it was late 96 was the last time that Sting competed. I don't know if he competed after Bash at the Beach 96. He must have.
He didn't. No, he didn't. That was his last match. Now, the original plan, according to Eric Bischoff, his 83 Weeks promo, I'm a subscriber to, I love it, was for a match at either Bash 97 or Great American Bash 97. That was the original plan, because it would have been around about a year, that sort of 8-9 months. But Sting got injured apparently in training, and they had other storylines going on that they were just like, well, let's just hold this off till Starrcade. And so yeah, like, it would have been interesting to see if it would have had a bit more impact, that sort of finish. But I mean, the Starrcade finish is probably another podcast in itself. But
yeah, such a shame.
That whole character of him coming down, and then you had situations where he was in the audience where they thought they were fans wearing Sting masks, but it was actually Sting wearing a Sting mask.
Yeah.
Kevin Nash played off it one day where he came down in a trench coat wearing a Sting mask, and I think it might have been at a War Games match or something. But it provided some great moments. The coming down from the rafters thing, of course, which obviously feels a bit icky now when we know what happened to Owen Hart. But it was great for his character, and it just, the "We Want Sting" chants just became a big part of Nitro. And what I thought WCW did really well is they didn't give you Sting every week. So you would be asking for Sting. Sometimes he'd come, sometimes he wouldn't. And that played into his character of, if it means something to me, or you're hurting one of my friends, or it involves Hogan, then I'm coming. Now, if you look at a lot of the times when the We Want Sting chants were happening, including the match we're going to look at later, there was no Hogan involved. And so it was most of the times it was Sting coming down to combat Hogan rather than the NWO.
Yeah. That whole period in the lead up to Starrcade was really interesting because it was announced a fair way out that Hogan Sting was happening in Starrcade, but it was known for long before that for those smart fans on the internet at that stage. But, Hogan was still involved in pay-per-views. He wasn't, I don't believe, involved in any capacity in World War III, which is November. But back in October, there was that cage. Remember that huge cage?
Yeah.
He against Piper. Now, I'm not sure if that was for the championship or not, but it was an interesting period because it wasn't. Okay. It was an interesting period because it felt like we're just filling in time until we got to the Golden Goose, which was that Starrcade match with Sting. Also, going back to that uncensored 97 pay-per-view, the first that aired in New Zealand, at the end of that match, which was team, I think was that a 3-team match as well?
It was like it was like a Royal Rumble type thing, right? That match actually had the potential to be awesome, but they booked it terribly.
I think that might have been like Team WCW, Team Piper, Team NWO. I think that's what it was. And of course, at the end of that, that's when Sting came down, and it was still people were still a little bit unsure which side he's on, and then he beat the crap out of the NWO, and good times. Let's move on to moment number 2. Bret the Hitman Hart against he whose name we don't often say, but Chris Benoit. The Owen Hart tribute match, October 4, 1999. Is this the first match that we've actually talked about? I think it's the first match we've talked about. And there were many tremendous matches on Nitro. Arguably, there were probably some that were better than this, but I guess because of the emotion of the moment and because of the caliber of the athletes, this one really goes down in history as being really one of the greats. I went back and watched it again just yesterday. A really good technical match, hard hitting, 2 of the very best. What I forgot was that this was in the exact same arena where Owen had died. And back then, I don't know if it didn't creep me out yesterday, but it kind of blew my mind. That must have been so hard for Bret Hart to, even though he's paying tribute to his brother, to be in the building, to be damn near in the spot. I don't know. Is that bad taste? It is what it is. I mean, obviously both guys agreed to it. And I mean, it was a great match.
That arena may have been booked a year in advance, right? So it is what it is. And in fact, it probably would have been, because when did Owen die, Dion? Was it
May 99, and this was October?
Yeah, so they would have had the Kemper Arena booked well in advance, right? Because of American sport and all that sort of stuff. So a great match. And of course, they'd wrestle again, I think a few months later in the finals of the WCW tournament, I think it was. Right. Title tournament when Russo came in and took over the book. But yeah, a great match from bell to bell. It's a weird match to watch because you know that both of them are doing it for their own reasons, which is to honor a brother and a really good friend. So yeah, just a beautiful wrestling match, a beautiful moment between the two. And I think, like for Bret, you know how pro-Canadian is, to be in there with another Canadian, and a Canadian who kind of antipies what the dungeon was all about, and Chris Benoit, just a great matchup. And it was just, that was just a really weird time in wrestling because we'd lost Pillman, we'd lost Owen Hart, all these, and it was weird as a wrestling fan experiencing death. And how wrestling reacts to that. And I always think tribute matches are the best way to go. Where you just get 2 guys, do a match, pull out some moves from that wrestler, and then there were a couple of nods to the WrestleMania 10 match involved in this match if you watched it, a couple of them, which I thought was really nice as well. Yeah,
so you can get your eyes around this match. It is all over YouTube, and well worth tracking down. Before we head into number 1, please hit that like and subscribe. We hope you've enjoyed this top 10 memorable moments. Number 1 is Goldberg defeats Hollywood Hogan, July 6, 1998. Say what you want about Goldberg. Say what you want about Hogan. And say what you want about the eventual sinking ship of WCW. This was the biggest moment on WCW Monday Nitro. Opinion-based, but almost factually based, right? Surely it was, Brad.
Biggest crowd they ever had. Biggest
Georgia Dome, right?
Yeah, 60 odd thousand, I think, ended up having in there.
Mm,
Biggest gate they ever had in terms of money. Biggest, I think they pulled a massive TV rating.
mm,
And this, of course, I don't know if you know this, but doing research in this, they had lost 2 weeks before. They'd
right.
lost the rating battle to Raw, and and then the following Monday they announced that we're going to be in Georgia Dome. We got a big moment for Goldberg, and that's when Hogan was politicking on camera to not have him. And then, of course,
Mm,
the start of the show ends up with "You can get to me, but you have to go through Scott Hall first," and all that sort
yeah,
of stuff. So this
yeah,
was a reactionary from them to give the best match possible on TV and to give that moment. And unfortunately and weirdly, the only match these two ever had.
you're right. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I think we probably should have got more. But Hogan ended up, when Goldberg was champ, Hogan was off doing little side questy things and then
Mm,
semi-retired. And we never got that rematch, which is really strange. But
yeah,
it is what it is. A great pop, a great moment. Feel great for Bill Goldberg when you watch this. I know that wrestling wasn't in his veins, but he'd
mm,
done such a good job being an intense character and lifting WCW to the heights that it was at, that he kind of deserved this moment. He was the
yeah,
biggest thing they had. They needed to strap the belt on him. WWF acted pretty quickly with Stone Cold. WCW acted very, very quickly with Goldberg.
mm,
And he was a legit dominant champion. And yeah, creative decisions they made later on in the year, they probably regret now. But
yeah.
this was a great moment. I think it was the right thing to do, even though they gave it away per se on free television.
Yeah, yeah, and we spoke a few weeks ago, I think, about Hogan and Warrior, and the fact that that was Warrior's greatest match, the WrestleMania 6 match, and we discussed the rematch earlier today. This wasn't on the same level, of course, but Goldberg did have to step up a little bit more to hang in this one. It wasn't a 15 to 20-minute classic. It was a short match in terms of main events for a world championship, notwithstanding it was on free television. But it did feel like a step up for him. It felt like he had to work more for the win. I'm talking
Well, he
from a
had to win
kayfabe
two matches. He
perspective.
had to beat Scott Hall, probably one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, not to be a world champion in either
Mm,
major company. And then he had to beat Hogan, who was the biggest name in the history of the
yeah,
sport. So
yeah. This
it
was
was
a
a
great
great
episode
moment.
of Nitro too, wasn't
It
it?
was
Because, like you say,
it
the
was a
40,000 crowd.
really good episode.
Yeah, and also a couple of weeks earlier, it was announced that they were going to the Georgia Dome. So it was there were now and then there was a Nitro in the future that was promoted early. That was this is I can't miss, and WWF would often try and match. I remember I was. Do you remember IRC? We're
Yeah,
talking back in the day. So
yeah.
text chat. I had a buddy who worked for a university in the States. We connected somehow, and I would often get hold of him and say, "Hey, man, can you send a tape of this wrestling show?" Not knowing he was into wrestling. And there was one of them in '97, I think. I said, "If you can tape Raw and Nitro from the same day," and he's like, "Bro, I got you. I'm going to be watching that." And then he was my hookup. It's great. Mm. There you go. Top 10. Plenty more
Hey
moments.
man, I got you.
Bro, I got you, bro. Um, yeah, top 10 moments of Nitro. There are squillions more. All the
A
stuff
lot
is
more. Yeah.
subjective. But that was a lot of fun going back and taking the walk down memory lane. As we'll do with our match review, all related
Yes.
as things have happened to work out. WCW Fall Brawl 97. So we hit the pay-per-views now. NWO, which was Kevin Nash, Conan, Bagwell, and Six against the Four Horsemen, Flair, Benoit, Steve McMichael, and
Mm.
Kurt Hennig. Hennig had just been pulled into the Horsemen. Again, Arn Anderson said, "I'll give you my spot." But earlier in the pay-per-view, Hennig was taken out. I think he had a broken arm or something, or his arm was
They
broken by the NWO.
he
Didn't
was
show up. Looked
It
like
was
four or
the
three.
lying on the ground post
Oh,
attack. Don't
that
know who
old
the attack
chestnut.
is. Yeah.
Any witnesses? No, not a
No.
witness in
No
sight.
witnesses.
Yeah, I like Fall Brawl. I liked the War Games match. The double, the double ringed cage.
Mm.
Feels like there's only so much you can do, and I've been in one. People, wrestlers, talent can do in those matches because it's a punch kick. You can't really do a lot of high flying spots in that cage. It was so damn low.
Yeah.
But I thought this match was decent.
Right.
As far as War Games matches go, because again, it was a bit of a means to an end. It was clearly all about the fact that Henning was going to be turning on the Horsemen. And I thought the way that they did it was very NWO-esque, but still kind of clever. And they didn't piss about. He got in there. He threw the handcuffs about to his NWO buddies, and they went and proceeded about beating down Ric Flair until someone quit.
So, Henning was over, right? Like the crowd could not wait for him to get in the ring.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings about this. I did not like the match at all. Watched it, I think we both watched it within the last sort of 48 hours, right?
Yeah.
And I thought you're right. Like there's not a lot you can do, but there's more you can do than just the kick punch they were doing. And aside from a couple of sequences between Benoit and Six in the middle of the match, and Benoit was the out and out MVP of this match. He was awesome from bell to bell.
Yeah, even Benoit Bagwell to kick things off, I thought was good.
Yeah, that was decent. Yeah, and there was a really cool sequence with Benoit and Six in the middle of the match that I loved. But I don't know, man. I just I thought this match was super boring, and I know it's hard when you've got a cage and cameras and stuff like that, but there was just nothing engaging me in this. I guess maybe because I knew the finish. But WCW was so obsessed with the swerve, and I feel like there was more legs in a drawn-out Henning heel turn than to do it in that moment. And I think this was actually the right moment for them to end a pay-per-view with WCW on top. In Ric Flair's hometown, Henning comes in late, gets the win or whatever, and you can, because you can protect your heels in a cage match, right? Like you can. And you have a guy like Six maybe tap out or say I quit when he's handcuffed or something. I don't know. I felt that the Henning stuff could have been more played out because he was over big, and the crowd really wanted Flair to win. And it felt at this point we were getting the same finish at every single WCW pay-per-view.
Yeah, but the formula worked because what did they want? They wanted to win the ratings war, and they still would. These pay-per-views would end every time a coconut with Tony Schiavone or Bobby Heenan saying, "What are we going to see on Nitro? You got to tune in." It was all about driving eyes to Nitro.
It was, and Bischoff's talked about the pay-per-view being a tool to television, and I get that, but I kind of feel like you could have just, for the benefit of the Flair Henning story, this could have played out so differently, and you could have had Henning getting jealous of Flair throughout the course of maybe and maybe lead to a Starrcade match, right? So that gives you 8 to 10 weeks to build to Henning joining the NWO at a Starrcade or something like that. And that, I think that could have been better for those two particular
that would have been
individuals
great.
and their storyline, and to make more of the match. To me, it was just rinse and repeat. And I get the formula was working, but it's just that old caveat. And Tony Schiavone used to talk about it all the time. We're our guys, and he's right. Like Ric Flair's getting, and I know that Ric Flair's not the most popular guy in terms of storyline with the rest of the locker room. He's getting his ass beat. All the boys are. Like, where was Sting? Where was Lex Luger? Where was, I know the Giant. I think the Giant was bad at that point. Where was Randy Savage? Where were all these people that were anti-NWO? That to me was the frustrating jumping the shark moment with this whole entire NWO thing, is that it was NWO versus WCW, but very rarely did WCW as a locker room combine to stick up for their company. So I just think that you could have gone a different route with this, had a feel-good moment for the baby faces. NWO could have got their heat right back the very next night. Yeah. They could have beat the shit out of the Horsemen the next night. I just feel, I wasn't a fan from start to finish.
Yeah, and that makes sense. But I guess when you look back, I can't think of anyone who joined WCW that was courted over a long period, or that you could see there being signs. It's almost like that afternoon they were like, why don't we put Buff Bagwell in the NWO, bro? Yeah. And then all of a sudden he was in there, The only one that I can think wasn't quite like that was Diamond Dallas Page, because he was courted for quite some time, which led into that tremendous series of matches with Randy Savage. But of course, DDP turned down the offer of the NWO. But yeah, otherwise they were in, and then it was just another, oh God, here we go. Now there's 12 of them. Yeah. It's I did like the end of the match though. And I liked the ruthlessness in that Henning was going to slam Flair's head in the cage. They're like, you guys better quit, bro. and then they quit, and he's like, psych, and then he smashes the head anyway. And
But then
like
they
we
did
said earlier,
nothing
that was
with
it.
I know they gave Hennig like a US title run, and he got a couple of matches with Flair. But like, I don't know, man, he just became another guy in the NWO. He became like, Rick Rude's mate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I mean, most of them did.
Yeah.
Most of them were, it was just a waste of time half the time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well. It's easy to look back, I suppose, isn't it, and book in retrospect, but I just wish things went a little bit better.
Thumbs down for me, Dion.
I'm going to go like that. Have I got both my thumbs on screen? There you go. A thumb up and a thumb down, because I enjoyed this period of WCW. I enjoyed, I really enjoyed the way that Hennig was brought into the Four Horsemen, and the fact that he just shat on them from a story perspective, notwithstanding the fact that he was the 87th member of the NWO at the time. Match was fine, but one up, one down. We do have another suggestion for next week. This is from Gemma Richardson of Christchurch, right here in New Zealand, who, very timely, by the way, Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair versus Becky Lynch, WrestleMania 35.
I was there.
Timely for a couple of reasons. Yep, we were both there. We watched that one. And number two, next week, we're going to look a little bit more in depth at these women's matches coming up at WrestleMania 42. So two birds and one stone, one would say.
I have not seen this match since.
I don't know if I have either. I'm actually really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I actually might watch the Mania from start to finish. I know it's about a 13-hour watch. Just because I think I've watched the Seth Brock match and the Kofi Daniel Bryan match, but that's about it. Like, so I think I might go back and watch this whole entire card.
Yeah, boy, I bet you're looking forward to Kurt Angle and Baron Corbin.
Yeah, and is it Bobby Lashley and Finn Balor, I think, at some point?
Yeah, maybe. And then, of course, Orton versus AJ Styles, where you can listen to the crowd chanting, "Turn the lights off" for about 20 minutes.
We can't see.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. All right. One last question for you before we wrap up. What are you going to go back and watch of WCW now after this chat, whether it's to do with the chat or just has sparked some interest?
Ultimo Dragon, Rey Mysterio, and Eddie Guerrero matches. And a little bit of early doors Chris Jericho when he was a white meat babyface.
Yeah. I think I'll watch Ray and Eddie from Halloween Havoc 97. It's been far too long. Too long. All right, folks, thank you so much for sticking with us, and we'll see you again next week right here on That Sweet Pop.